have tracing paper or wax paper or something like that, and you want to explore what reflections look like just with that, you can certainly do that. Um, this is a little bit different teaching it this way this year, but we are going to do the best that we can here. We have a quadrilateral that has those coordinates, and we're going to reflect. Notice this capital R right here. Oops. This capital R meaning reflect, and we're going to reflect across the x-axis. And this right here is the x-axis. This is the x-axis. And we're going to reflect across that. So first thing we need to do is probably plot those points at 0, 3. And a point at 2, 4. A point at 4, 2. And a point at -2, 0. On your paper, when you're drawing this, please make sure that you use a straight edge to draw those lines. Now, it's also a good idea to make sure that we've labeled this. So this 0, 3 was F, this was G, this was H, and this was J. Okay, now remember when we used our tools and we constructed the new shape and we went across a line, and we could actually figure out that this point is going to be equal distance across this line from the other point. So we could actually move F, instead of being 3 up, it's going to be 3 down. We would still go over here, and instead of being up 4, we would be down 4 right here. And instead of being up 2, we would go down 2. And this one is on the line, so it actually would stay on the line. So that one doesn't move. And we can construct with our straight edge the point from one point to the other. Let's look a little more closely at these points. F was at 0, 3. G was at 2, 4. H is at 4, 2. And J is at -2, 0. This is J, and J prime are exactly the same spot. They are at -2, 0. This is F prime, this is G prime, and this is H prime. So F prime ends up being at 0, -3, and G prime ends up being at 2, -4, and H prime ends up being at 4, -2. So they want us to determine here what is a general rule for reflecting a point across the x-axis. So if we're reflecting across the x-axis, then the rule is just change the sign of y. So to reflect across the x-axis, change the sign of y. So these all became negative. Now 0 stayed 0, so we didn't have a change there. Let's go ahead and look at B and see if we can figure out what happens when we reflect across the y-axis. So on the y-axis, we're talking about this line right here being the y-axis. And let's start by putting that point back on here. Now we're using the same point that we used in example, or in part A. So we are at 0, 3, we are at 2, 4, we are at 4, 2, and we are at negative 2, 0. Okay, now we need to go ahead and this is F, G, H, and J. Now we're going to see what happens flipping it across the y-axis. Now note that this time F is the one that stays the same because that is on the y-axis. And G was 2 to the right, and now it's going to be 2 to the left. So there's our G prime. And our H prime was 4 to the right. Let's move it 4 to the left. And J was 2 to the left, and it's going to move 2 to the right. So this is J prime, this is H prime. So notice that flipped over the axis and is reflected over to the other side. So again, let's look at the points. Our first F was 0, 3. Our G was at 2, 4. H was at 4, 2. And J was at negative 2, 0. And when we look at our new shape, F prime stayed in the exact same spot. G prime is now at negative 2, 4. H prime is now at negative 4, 2. And J prime is at 2, 0. So what changed here? When we reflected across the y-axis, we changed the sign of x. Notice I'm using a capital R to represent a reflection. Go ahead and pause the video, and it will take you several minutes to get this drawn out, but draw out the original shape and the reflection for both parts A and B, and then come back and check the video. So I'm going to graph the original points at negative 5, 6, 1, negative 2, and C is at negative 3, negative 4. Please use a straight edge to draw your graphs. And is at, or so if this is at 5, 6, then to reflect across the x-axis, we're changing the y value. So A will be at -5, -6, A prime, and B prime will be at 1, +2, and C prime will be at -3, +4. So -5, -6 is A prime. B prime is at 1, 2, and C prime is at -3, +4. And your shapes should look like that. On the second one, we still have A graphed at -5, 6, and B at 1, -2, and C at -3, -4. And so we're going across the y-axis. That means we're changing the x values. So our A prime would be at 5, 6. B prime is at -1, -2. And C prime is at +3, -4. So we only changed the x values. So at 5, 6, put our A prime. B prime is at -1, -2. Don't know why my pen doesn't want to work. C prime is at 3, -4. Connect your dots. And there you have it. Let's wrap that up by making a concept box that you can come back to at any time. And you will probably want to refer back to this multiple times during your Math Excel and during your next test. So reflecting across the x-axis, x, y becomes x minus y. So you're changing the sign of y. When we reflect across the y-axis, our xy changes to be a negative xy. So we change the sign of the x value. There's another line that we reflect across, and we're going to go ahead and introduce that example here. Actually, I'll put it in the next